Good morning.
Mom's listening, so.
Well, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. You're going through a tunnel. Okay, so she probably did too. Bet she did.
Your she says no.
Yeah, of course she does. What's she supposed to do? Admit it? She can't admit it. All right. Let's start way back at the beginning in Egyptian history here. Focus, people. Focus. Okay. So let's start way back at the beginning in Egyptian history. We have a couple. It depends on which one of these you read. If you read the book of mythology, read the book of myths, it has a particular, it starts off with in the land of Egypt and has some sort of history stuff. It's a little bit different than the stuff in this book, which is more of a, says the ADHD teacher, shh. I have never been diagnosed. They didn't diagnose you with that when you were my age. They just said, you're a bad kid. So be grateful. There's some you can be grateful for. That's one of the 5 gifts of Hathor you can be grateful for today. Put that one on the thumb because it's super important. Okay, so we'll talk about the 5 gifts of Hathor later. Not diagnosed, but who cares? Precisely. Who cares then? I don't have a syndrome. I'm a boy. It's a thing. We're like this. I'm a boy who didn't grow up. I'm one of the lost boys. You caught me. I didn't actually drive to Idaho. I flew. Okay, so.
Where's your little fairy?
That's one impressive ditch story.
Yeah. I tried to pass someone on the freeway, and then it was icy, and then the car spun out and went into a ditch. And then I drove it out of the ditch and drove home.
All while flying? Or did you try to pass a helicopter?
So anyway, about Egyptian history. Who is the first king that we know of? Be careful with this question. Who is the first king that we know of in Egyptian history?
Amenhotep.
Not quite. I mean, that's a good.
You mentioned him last week, but I don't remember the name.
No, I actually told you. Well, this is the first king that we have a name for. That's why it's tricky.
Oh, we talked
Elizabeth
about.
Elizabeth is right. Narmer is the guy that we're talking about. Except that he is not the first king we know of in Egyptian history.
Was it the Scorpion King?
That's the guy, the Scorpion King. Bingo. Well done, Copeland. So, yeah, the Scorpion. You know why he's called the Scorpion King? Does anybody know why? Oh, now I have to get clever here. Hold on.
You have to raise your hand in Zoom.
You can raise your hand, but I'm going to ignore that. So just like pop your mic open and talk. I'm sorry. There are 20 people. If we were in class, and if you wave your hand and wave it like on the camera, I will see you, and then you can unmute your mic, but you might as well just unmute your mic and talk.
Did he
Scorpions?
What? Sorry, say that again?
Did he kill people with the scorpions?
No, I love that idea, but no.
Wasn't it a statue of this king with the label of scorpion underneath it?
You're so darn smart. Yes. We don't actually know. Oh, right. Yeah, never mind. Hold on. I have to get past all of the movie. Yeah, there we go. I have to get past all of the stuff about the movie, which was not worth seeing, people. Not a good movie about Egypt. Well, it wasn't. There are good movies about Egyptian history, but that was not one of them. There actually aren't very many. All right, here. This is a picture of the cartouche. This is all we know. We know that this dude here was a king, and we know that this right here is a scorpion. And
So we just
We don't know anything else about this guy. He's supposed we don't know anything else about this guy. He's supposed to have been from the Upper Kingdom and conquered the Lower Kingdom. Pop quiz. In Egypt, the Upper Kingdom is north or south?
throwing it out there north.
Upper Kingdom is not north.
So in reality, I was right, though, because if I got the wrong answer, then the right answer was revealed. Therefore, I have revealed the right answer and is now able
Stop
to
backing
get
yourself
it.
up.
I have
You're
now
doing it wrong.
taken the journey.
You, Tim!
Upper Egypt is upriver.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Upper Egypt is upriver, and the Nile flows which direction? Bye, sweetie. Love you.
Love you too.
Stop. Kidding.
Close to north.
Yeah, the Upper Kingdom is north because the Nile flows north. And the
That's
Upper
what
Kingdom
I said.
is south. Yes.
I said it was north.
Yeah, but you were wrong. And then
But
you
you
made me
just
wrong.
said the same exact thing that I did.
Yes, and I was wrong, just as wrong as you were.
Upper
Um,
south, the lower kingdom is north.
That's correct. Because water flows in that direction. So this is all we really know. We have only this one carving for this king, and we don't have a name, really. That's why he's just called the Scorpion King. Now, it is possible, because remember, you don't have long books of history here of people keeping these extensive records. You don't really have that. So it is not possible to say for sure that the Scorpion King is not Narmer. He might have been. It's unlikely, but it's possible. There's also a king named Menes. Yeah, I'll get to the tabs there. There's also a king called Menes who may be the same as Narmer. We don't know. A lot of these kings had multiple names. You had one name when you were young, and then when you grew up and became pharaoh, you would adopt another name, the name of a god or whatever. And so a lot of these kings had multiple names. And if you were an Egyptian, you would have had no trouble with this. You would have known which one went with who, and it would have been fine. But for us, we don't have any of this context, right? We just don't have enough historical context or enough cultural knowledge to really know which name goes with which king. It's sort of like, you have, I always use Michael Jordan for this. For some of you, Michael Jordan is like too old for you to remember, but he was called MJ, M32, all kinds of different names, and we knew what they all were. You could refer to him in a bunch of different ways, and it was fine. We would know that you were talking about the same guy. But if you came to the United States from another country, you wouldn't necessarily know that. And certainly if you came from another planet, and we might as well consider ourselves to be living on another planet from the ancient Egyptians, you would have had no idea. So a lot of this stuff, like we talked about last week, a lot of this stuff was obvious to the people who were living there, obvious to the people who studied or were learning this stuff, and totally obscure, like opaque to us. We have no idea what some of this stuff means. So a lot of this stuff is guesswork. This is I think it's on a ball. You can see a little bit of the ball here. If I share my screen again, hold on, give me a second. I have like 26 tabs open trying to get all this stuff done. So share. So if you are looking at this, here's an example of this. Some of you are looking at the tabs on my screen. Yes, Poop to Gold is a book which you will be able to buy at Thanksgiving. I'll have my name on it. It will not say Mr. C, which is like my real name, but it will have my other name, the name that doesn't really matter. Speaking of names, well, we'll get to that. We don't have to get to that. So this is one window of 5, 6. Each one has minimum of 5 or 6 tabs open. I have a lot of things going on, and it's probably not a good idea. Don't be like me. Anyway, so this is all we really know about this guy. This is a sort of a conquering thing. He's holding a weapon, and this is somebody he's defeating over here. And we have other things on this inscription, on this carving, that show him as a conqueror. We know that, but that's really about all we know. Either Narmer or Menes, or possibly both, because it's the same guy, or the Scorpion King, or possibly all three, because they're all the same guy, unified Egypt. It's the first one to unify Egypt. This is about 3500 BC, roughly. It's hard to date exactly because the Egyptians have this habit of, when they list their kings, they list them in a chronological order, but even if the two kings were ruled at the same time, they would put one of them before the other, so it looks like they stack, but they don't. They're actually ruling at the same time. And the Egyptians didn't care about that. And now also think about this for just a second. One of the things we take for granted in this history is dating, okay? So we have not dating, but like dates, okay? And some of you are getting really excited. Chill back, okay? We're not going to talk about that. There's no smooching in this class, okay? So, yet. I think there might be some later we talk about the myths, but I can't remember. We'll get there. Okay, so, but when you date things, that didn't come out right either. When you put a date on an event, there it is. When you put a date on an event, we talk about 3500 BC, but there is something about 3500 BC that presupposes knowledge that they would not necessarily have had. What is that? When you say 3500 BC, it presupposes you know something. What is it that it presupposes you know? What does the BC mean?
Before Christ.
So that presupposes you know something about
Christ.
Yes.
Bingo. You got to know when 0 is. If you're 3,500 years before, do you necessarily know?
Maybe.
Maybe.
For massive geological events, if we knew when those occurred, according to our time scale, and somebody wrote about them.
Okay, but if you lived in that culture, would you be saying, this is 3,500 years BC?
No.
No, of course not. You would probably have. How would you have dated your years? How would you have labeled your years?
I did flooding of the Nile.
Okay, but the Nile does that every year. That's kind of going to be ineffective, don't you think?
No, because every year it does it, so you just keep track of how many times it does it.
Okay, counting from when though? What is 0?
The earth.
From when Ra made the earth, which is not going to have a date on it. Like you, for instance, when Ra reigned as Pharaoh. If you look at the mythology, Pharaoh for thousands of years before anything happened, really. And don't get confused, Ra did not reign for thousands of years. But that's the mythology, right? Ra was king in Egypt for thousands of years. So how do you even date that? You don't even start dating things until after Ra stops being king. In fact, until after the gods stop being Pharaoh. So you'd be dating it. What's the most logical way to date something if you have turnover in rulers?
Asking you just do it by however long each pharaoh would do. You'd sort of, like you said before, it's just pharaoh after pharaoh. That's the time. That's
it. That's exactly right. You would say, well, this is the 3rd year of Amenhotep, or this is the 5th year of whatever. Now, you might have, and this does happen, you might have a kind of a cataclysm, some major event of volcanic eruption, a particularly bad year, a year when the Nile did not inundate. when you had no Nile flood, like that would have been unusual enough that everybody would have said, oh, the sky's falling. And then you might have said, well, this is the 8th year since the sky was falling or whatever. We think of this as kind of funny, but you should actually ask your parents when something happened. Like pick an event in your history and ask your parents when it happened. Yes, the Becks are waving while a Beck is waving at me.
Can you give time by when the river was overflowing?
You could do that, but the problem is that the river overflows every year. So it would always be the year 1. It's not really going to work that well. How long ago was that? Well, that was this year. It was in the year 1. So this year. No, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't this year. Well, it totally was. It was the year 1. I remember. It was the Nile flood. Oh, I guess this year. Yeah, that's not going to work. So you need a different way of doing that. But if you ask your parents about an event that happened in the past, they will remember, sometimes they will remember the year. But more than likely, they will remember the year in different ways, as in your father will remember the year by counting from a different event than your mother will remember the year by counting from. Almost certainly, and this may not be true, but this is true in our family, and it's definitely true of my mother and father as well. My father tries to figure out, based on something that happened somewhere, was that the same year, and what year was that? My mother counts by the year so-and-so was 3 years old then, or that was the year so-and-so was born, or whatever. These are kind of significant events to mothers because they did the bearing. For the father, I hate to say this, not quite as, like, it's not that you're not memorable. Please don't get the wrong idea. You're like super memorable and awesome, and every one of you is a precious child of God. But I don't know how old you are. I don't really remember that. Like, that's not a big thing. And the problem that you guys will have in your families is people will probably ask you all the time, what grade are you in?
And then you're home.
Yeah, it's kind of an issue for you guys. But does that not happen? You go out, people meet you, and they're like, oh, wow.
Every single time.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Every time.
Yeah, they ask you every time because this is a question that normal people can answer, but we are not normal because we all attend Mr. C's Academy for the Seriously Deranged Intelligence. And so we do not obey the rules that mortals obey.
Also, if you skipped a grade, it doesn't really give them a lot of, anything.
Or if you're like, I don't even know what that means because I don't do the school thing.
Puny mortals.
Make one up that's like cartoonishly weird. So if you're like 14 years old and somebody asks you what grade you're in, tell them 3rd. It seriously screws with their head when you do that. Or tell them you're a senior in high school. They like that's even better. Either way, they're gonna have no box to put you in, and that's good because you don't belong in a box. So
I'm in preschool.
You belong in a prison. No, that's you haven't done anything criminally awful yet.
Oh, prism, not prison.
A prism, yes. You refract the light of the universe in unique and different ways.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Vivian. I knew you would catch that. Okay, so remember that dating these things, putting dates on these events is very difficult because the Egyptians can't really help us. Because their dating schemes will be totally different than ours and based on events we don't necessarily know. So it will be very difficult to do that. Also remember, and we're talking about big chunks of time here, hundreds of years, such and such happened in this 100-year period. I mean, so this is sort of like talking about Teddy Roosevelt and the space program in the same context. Really Or even in Egyptian culture, like 200 years is not a big deal, right? So you're talking about the Declaration of Independence and the space shuttle as if they happened at the same time. Well, how do you know? Like, you don't know anything. We don't know. We just don't have enough context. So a lot of this stuff is guesswork, and you have to be kind of patient with how the story might change, or how the dates might change, or how the order of things might change. When we talk about the pharaohs, this is critical to know. So if you're taking notes, this is actually important. We break Egyptian history into periods. What do we call those periods? Anybody? What do we call those periods?
Period.
Nice try. I appreciate you venturing. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And in this point, something ventured, also nothing gained, because that's not right. We jumped out a window. Yeah, no, we're not doing Big Hero 6 quotes today. They're called kingdoms. So you have the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom. These are periods that we roughly break Egyptian history, and then there are periods in between that don't really have they're interregnums, or the oh, that's cute. But then within the kingdoms, in the Old Kingdom, you will have you will also break them into dynasties, of which there are 20 some odd. So you'll have the first dynasty, the second dynasty, the third. What's a dynasty? Yes. Go ahead. Madam Beck, raise your hand. So.
Isn't it like a family of kings and queens who ruled for a while and they passed it down?
Give the girl a bright gold star. Yes, correct. That is, it's a line of kings, or it can be queens, related by blood. The dynasties, some of the dynasties are real short, and some of the dynasties have people in them that are not necessarily related by blood, but we don't really know who they are. So we just kind of stuff them all together and put a bow on it and say, there, it's the 17th kingdom or the 17th dynasty, because we don't really know. That's important to know. So when we talk about Egyptian archaeology, we talk about Egyptian mythology, most of the myths that we're going to talk about actually come from the late kingdom. These are from the middle and late New Kingdom. So fairly recent in terms of the actual timeline of history. This would be in the 600, 500, 400 era of Egyptian history, 400 BC, rather than like 3500 BC, although the events that are being described would have been happening in 3500 BC. Why would that be so? Why is it that all of a sudden we get all of this Egyptian history and mythology and all of this stuff starting at around 600 BC? Why? Why then?
What happened at 600 BC?
Roughly, what happened then? Madam Beck again.
When they started writing.
Go ahead.
When they started writing?
No, they were writing long, long before that. Great guess. Terrific guess. But no, that's not why. They had been writing, the Egyptians had writing at about 3000 BC, 3500, somewhere in the neighborhood. So they'd been writing for 3,000 years when this happened. But some things began to happen right about in this period. What happened was they were conquered. For about 3,000 years, the Egyptians were never conquered. The upper kingdom would conquer the lower kingdom would conquer the upper kingdom. You'd have the Hyksos pharaohs that conquered the Nile Delta for a while. But in general, like the kingdom of Egypt was unconquered for like 3,000 years, which is quite an achievement when you think about it. There are some geographic reasons why, but it's a pretty serious achievement. Along about that point, they get conquered by the Akkadians, and then they get conquered by the Assyrians. That's actually the Assyrians that starts to make a big deal out of it. And then they get conquered by Alexander the Great about 330 BC. So why would that matter? Like, why would we all of a sudden have all of this stuff that we're learning about Egypt because they got conquered? Well, most people are focusing. Not everybody is like laser focused as you, Tab. Elizabeth, go ahead.
The conquering nations made records of the things like amounts of prisoners and their spoils to record their might, whether or not they actually had any.
Whether or not they actually had any, I'm glad you put that in there. Yeah, that's exactly right. They started, and then they started having interaction with these other cultures, and they wanted to dig into the history, because the longer and more powerful the history of the group that you just conquered, the better you are, right? So that makes you look better. And so Egypt was great because they had thousands of years of history. Unfortunately, when you do this, Herodotus is like the worst for this. Herodotus saw everything through a Greek lens. So when he's writing about Egyptian history, he is stapling the names of Greek gods onto the names of Egyptian gods. So, for instance, I think it's Osiris. I think it's Osiris. He calls Osiris Dionysius. That's great, but Osiris and Dionysius don't really have anything to do with each other, as far as I can tell. When you start unpacking the myths, yeah, I don't see that they have very much to do with each other at all. But he couldn't kind of get his head around this. The Greeks are all big on that anyway. The reason we have what's a barbarian, for instance? If I ask you what's a barbarian, what does that mean? Rachel Louise.
Savage?
Yeah, savage. Go ahead, Rachel.
It's someone from somewhere else.
Elizabeth.
An uncivilized person.
Uncivilized person. Miriam, did you have something else? I still see you, Rachel. Hang on. Go ahead, Miriam.
I think it was I think there was a country and they just came for that country. Oh, yeah, my name's Abby, by the way. My mom just has Miriam on there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's fine.
It's not fine. I should be better than that. Rachel Louise, go ahead.
It was more like an insult because they were like uncivilized.
It was. Yeah, all of that's right. The Greeks sort of invented this word because when they would go and talk to the Persians, they couldn't understand a word they were saying. To them, it sounded like bar, 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 bar. I swear to you, this is where the word comes from. So barbarians are just people who don't talk right.
Could it have anything to do with the root word barb, meaning beard?
No, I don't think. At least linguists tell me no. The Romans had other words for people who were uncultured and didn't really merit the title of Roman. They had other words for that. But for the Greeks, who dominated the Mediterranean culture for 1,000 years, and really, frankly, the Greeks have never quit dominating world culture, but whatever. Anybody who didn't speak Greek was, by definition, an uncultured swine. Like, they were barbarians. So they coined the word to mean somebody who isn't Greek, really. So Herodotus, when he writes all his history down, and he writes down a lot of these myths and a lot of these folk tales and fairy tales and stuff, when he's writing this stuff down, he's sort of up-civilizing it by turning it into Greek stuff. Oh, yeah. You can rename yourself, Abby, if you want to do that. Please rename yourself to something that you don't mind if I call you, because I probably will call you that. So if I get one-armed Joey at the top of the screen, at the top of my screen here, that would be cool. The Mighty Beck family works really good, though. I kind of like that. Rachel Louise, what?
I drew a picture of Eliza as one-armed Joey.
Nice. Oh, you have to send that to me.
I'm going to.
You have to send that to me. I have to put that on my wall.
I'm going to send it to you.
That is awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go back to the very beginnings then. Now we've sort of established kind of what is the Egyptian timeline. Actually, there's one more thing that I wanted to ask. Why is it that Egypt was able to defend itself so well for 3,000 years? Why? There's a multiple reasons here.
Because of the harsh deserts, it's hard for anybody to get in or out of Egypt.
Yes, that's correct, Joshua. If you look at the map, do I have a map here? I have a map. Hold on. Share desktop.
Go off.
Share. I always have a map. I love maps. I'm totally a map nerd. Yes. There's a book, for those of you who, while I'm looking this up, who need another book to read, called Maphead. Maphead is hieroglyphic typewriter, my meetings. Is it this one? I don't think it's that one. No, it's not that window. That's the problem with having like 500,000 windows open. There it is. There's a book called Maphead. It is a fantastic book. Do I have this on my shelf? Do I have Maphead on my shelf? No, I loaned it. About the power of maps. I have books of maps. I draw maps. I don't doodle. I draw maps. Because I might want to write about the people who live in the place that I'm drawing about.
That's awesome.
Right? I mean, well, I thought so. Thank you. That makes me feel so good.
I'm going to start doing that now.
Yeah, just draw. Some people doodle, whatever. There is a Twitter account, which I can't remember, that computer generates a fictitious map every half an hour on the half hour, 24/7, 365. It names the cities, puts rivers and stuff. It's fun. It's super cool. All right, what am I doing? What was I doing? Oh, maps, right. I was pulling up a satellite map. And where is it? Still coming up. So yeah, I have maps are surprisingly hard to do. We talked about that a little bit last week, how difficult it is to make a good map. Figuring out how to make an accurate map is pretty difficult. And figuring out how to make a map that is intelligible to the people that you're showing it to, that is also fairly complex.
Especially for the Egyptians.
Sure, it would have been difficult not just for the Egyptians. Nobody had maps. Like, why would you make a map anyway? Like, what's the point? Where are you going to go? Egypt is all the world. Everything in the world is Egypt. Why would you go anywhere else?
As it's hot there?
Because you're a barbarian.
It's hot everywhere, Rachel Louise.
That's untrue. It's not hot in Antarctica.
Okay, I have an assignment.
Antarctica.
Wait.
Antarctica, yes.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
Well, it could be because you could go around and trade and find new lands.
You could, but, there's not really anybody else in the world that's worth paying much attention to, because they're all pretty much uncultured swine, and they're basically good for slaves, and that's about it. It's true. That's what the Chinese thought. The Chinese actually had a major expedition, a huge expedition with the world's largest wooden ships, like the biggest wooden ships ever in the history of the world. And they went sailing around the world, like every part of the world that they could find. And they sailed around, and then they sailed home and told the emperor there was nothing out there to see. The Egyptians were, or not the Egyptians, the Europeans were living in bark huts, and they were so proud of themselves because they had just figured out how to print a book, and the Chinese had been printing for like 800 years. Like, they have nothing. Like, their clothing is awful. We're wearing silk. They're wearing wool, sort of, sometimes, animal skins, stuff like that. We have paper money. They don't have money. So they just sailed home. Then they dismantled all their ships and never went out again. Well, not never again, but imagine their surprise when at the beginning of World War I, steam battleships sailed into their harbor. And they're like, whoa, wait, what? I cannot find my map.
Wait, but we're so much better than they are.
That was totally their reaction. Anyway, same thing with Egypt. The Egyptians are like, we are the dominant culture in the world, and really, come on, seriously, we are the world. Their cosmology, which we'll talk about their cosmology again here in just a second, but their cosmology put the world as a circle and Egypt in the middle of it. Because there was just Egypt, right? Like, what else was there?
Desert. There was desert.
Yeah, what's the point of that, though? I mean, that ain't no fun, man.
The Mediterranean.
Yeah, true. There is that thing out there.
There was the Nile.
There is the Nile. And they would go up the Nile to try to find the source, which they never could.
Their personality seems a lot like the United States. Just saying. Like...
Pretty much, thank you, Taya. Pretty much every culture. Waffles. Pretty much every culture.
Waffles. Who has waffles?
The Mighty Beck family. The Mighty Becks.
There's sourdough waffles.
I know. That's even worse. I didn't have breakfast, so. Anyway.
Neither did I, buddy.
All right, I can't find a map. I have too many tabs open and too many windows, and I can't quite figure out where I stuck it. But if you look at the map of ancient Egypt, or you look at the map of Egypt now, it doesn't make any difference. If you look at the map of Egypt now, what you find is there's a thin ribbon. I showed this map last week, but it's really small. There's a thin ribbon of the Nile, and it's green on both sides, and then a fan where it hits the Mediterranean that's also green, and the rest of it is desert. Seriously, it's 3 time zones of desert in both directions. And if you hike up the Nile far enough, you get into more land that's impassable. There are mountain ranges you can't get through. And finding the source of the Nile is impossible. It's deep, deep, deep in Africa, and you can't get there because people kill you when you try to go there. So, as far as they were concerned, the entire world was this narrow snake. When snakes are such a big part of Egypt, I mean, the whole world looks like a snake, doesn't it? Looks like a cobra, right? Thin, 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 big fan at the top. It looks like a cobra if you looked at it from the top. Who kills you? Nubians kill you. That's anybody with black skin was a Nubian.
But didn't you say that they didn't make maps with an overhead view? So how did they know it looked like a cobra from an overhead?
Well, this is pretty simple even from the ground. You walk along it and it winds and it sort of feels, even on the ground, it feels like a snake. I think it was Kipling who said all of Egypt is as wide as a rifle shot from one side to the other, and at its narrowest places as wide as a bow shot. It's extraordinarily narrow. It is actually possible to see from one side of your country to the other. It's that narrow. And that's their world. That's the whole world. I can't remember if it was Geraldine Pinch or if it was Roger Lancelin Green that said, if you walk into the desert far enough to get thirsty, it's already too late to walk back before you're dead. So that's kind of forbidding and nobody really comes there. So the Egyptians kind of live in this insulated society. Out on the coast, they will have traded some with the Phoenicians, and they weren't ignorant of the fact that there were Hittites and Assyrians and Akkadians and all of these other cultures, sort of, and Israelites, all up in along the Levant in the Mediterranean. But these are, I mean, what kind of culture is there in these places? You mean, you look at the Philistines, what kind of culture did they have? Nothing you would have paid much attention to. You're like in the 3rd or 4th dynasty, you had people building the pyramids. Okay?
Hey, Mr. C.
Yeah.
You told me to give Rachel a gold star.
Thank you, Vivian. Well done. I mean, if you're a culture that's been building the Valley of the Kings and the pyramids and the Sphinx and that kind of stuff, what's going to impress you?
Silk clothes.
Silk clothes, but you can't get those because the Chinese haven't found their way to you yet. Nothing.
Internet.
What?
Internet.
The internet, maybe. Might have impressed them, but probably not. They would have just seen it as magic, and they could do magic anyway.
Cell phones.
Yes, but remember, people, any sufficiently advanced technology counts as magic, is indistinguishable from magic. So it wouldn't look like magic. It's just a kind of magic they didn't know how to do. So that would have been cool, and they'd have been impressed by it. But they built the frickin' pyramids, people. Other cultures are building stuff out of mud brick. They built the pyramids. It's tough to impress people like that. And so they would go out there and they would fight them, and that was fun. But then what are they going to take from their cultures? Not really very much. And so when they got conquered in the 500s, 600s, it was a major shock for them. They never really recovered from that. And those cultures were super impressed by the things that Egyptians had been able to build and had been writing for thousands of years and whatever. So they grabbed their mythology, their history, and tried to make some sense of it, tried to make it into kinds of narrative stories where most of the Egyptians would not have seen those things that way. And in fact, a lot of them wouldn't even necessarily have known some of these stories. I have to talk briefly about religion, and then I want to talk about these myths. Okay, so for my guess is that a big chunk of you are LDS, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But even if you're not, most religions have a what's called a religious cult. And by that, I do not mean like that it's weird. I mean that it is isolated from the rest of the religion. Most religions have that. I don't think Nazarenes do, but you will find this in Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Catholicism, general Roman Catholicism has it, Mormon culture has it, many religious cultures do, where there is a part of the religion that is separate from the rest, and not everybody gets to see that. For instance, Russian Orthodox is a great example. Hebrew culture, definitely there's a big chunk of that in Hebrew culture as well. For Russian Orthodox, there is a particular part of the church that you don't get to go to. Only the priests get to go to it. Ancient Hebrews, they had the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. Not everybody got to go there. In fact, the only person who could go there really was the high priest. In the LDS church, the LDS church has church buildings that anybody can go into, but there are also temples. The temples are not open to anybody. You have to have an interview with
temple recommend.
Yeah, church. You have to have an interview with church leaders, and then you have to have a piece of paper signed by a couple of them that says that you live according to the principles of the church so that you can even go in the building. And even then, there are places in the building that that some people can go to, but other people cannot go to, and whatever. This is very normal in the ancient culture. So we're talking about Egyptian myths. In Greece, for instance, they have what are called the Eleusinian mysteries, and I'm going to spell this because this is one of those things. The Eleusinian mysteries were at Eleusis, and this is a female cult. This is the cult of Demeter, or sometimes Athena. It's probably Athena. And the Eleusinian mysteries, only women knew what they were. And then only those who had been initiated into the culture knew what those were. So they were kept secret. We now know a whole bunch about what they did there. But if you were a male in Greece, you did not know what happened there. We talk about these myths like, oh, this is a mythological story, whatever. But there's a whole bunch of these stories that were sacred myths that only the priests knew. And they didn't tell everybody else. These were part of, which one? Which temple? Well, there's temples all over the place. It's like 140 or so in the LDS Church. They're all over the place. There are, within 20 minutes drive of here, I think we have 7, maybe 8. I don't know. Inside, those temples are all a little bit different, but the rites that are performed in those temples, those are all the same, no matter which temple you go to. So it doesn't really matter which one you go to. But for the Israelites, there's the Temple of Solomon, and inside the Temple of Solomon is the Holy of Holies, and you don't get to go there. Even into the temple proper, you could go into the outer courtyard. Anybody could go there. That's where Jesus found everybody buying and selling and then drove them out with the whip and whatever. That was the outer courtyard. Inside, like into the temple, you could not go there unless you were a faithful Jew. You had to have purified yourself and made the appropriate sacrifices. You couldn't even go inside the temple. And the rites that were performed there were sacred, and not everybody knew that. Same kind of thing in Egyptian culture. When we're talking about some of these myths, we're talking about sacred mythology. We're talking about things that the average Egyptian would never have known. Because remember, if you were an average, everyday Egyptian, you didn't go in the temples. Like you couldn't go in there. You would come to the doors of the temples or the gates of the temples or whatever and talk to the priests or priestesses, give them your offering, or have them tell you what the offering would be, or send in a message like, I need Thoth to, I want this from, I need a message from Thoth. What should I do? Should I plant more wheat next year or whatever? And then the priestess would carry the message in, and Thoth would bring the answer back out. They bring the Thoth says, behold, blah, blah, blah. And there would be some ceremony that would go along with that. We don't know what those were because obviously we don't have a manual. And they wrote some of them, they put them on the walls, but it's really hard to interpret. I mean, they're all just two-dimensional. So it's really hard to interpret. But if you are a Mormon, I strongly recommend to you that you look up sacred Egyptian rituals. I cannot tell you why. I just recommend that you do. They have classes at Education Week down at Brigham Young University. They have a thing called Education Week, which you should totally go to. And in one of those classes, they had an ancient scholar, an ancient Akkadian and Egyptian scholar come and pull up a whole bunch of these Egyptian temple stuff and showed us these things. And it was crazy how many of them we already knew. It was ridiculously cool. I am still geeking out about this. I geek out about a lot of things. Don't say it. I know. It's true. Hi. Look, it's a sacred Egyptian cat at the Mighty Beck household. We'll get into why cats are sacred, but not this week. That's, I think, in next week or 2 weeks, or I can't remember, where I will teach you the coolest thing you ever heard about Joseph in Egypt. But not today. And I'm not kidding about this. I know you think you know Joseph in the coat of many colors and go, 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 Joseph and all of that. I know you guys think you know all that, and that's great. I'm going to teach you something that's way cooler and actually historically factual. but not today. Okay, let's talk about myths. How was the world created? If you were an Egyptian before the world was created, what was there?
Zeus.
No, they didn't know from Zeus.
Well, they believed that it was some sort of like black liquid called the nun or something.
Yes, none.
Nun.
We don't, as you remember from last week, they don't have vowels in ancient Egyptian, so we don't know that that was nun or nin or non, or we don't know. Nan? I don't know. Nan sounds weird. No, probably not. But I don't know. None, sort of. We don't know, but we think none. Okay, so none is this sort of like liquid, water. The number of cultures that have a legend about water covering the earth before the earth was made is kind of scary. I'm just saying. Most cultures have the ocean as the birthplace of civilization. Most cultures have that. Some cultures, and probably most as well, also have God getting really upset with how bad humans were and smiting them all in various ways. Just throwing that out there. Focus, people. BYU doesn't play Boise State until much later this year. You can argue about it then, but not right now. Okay? So, and then the argument will be settled the way men have settled arguments for thousands of years by mortal combat. Dang it. I lost the internet.
It's named.
Jetty, I have a question.
Jones, what are you doing over there?
Someone just
Everyone else's voices.
Someone just
Everyone just needs to calm down for a minute. I'm getting flashes of everyone's faces.
He died.
I should have warned you. I should
I'm
have
gonna start
warned you.
singing a song. Joshy, what song should I sing?
Jetty.
What?
I should have warned you. At least once per class period, my internet develops a hacking cough and kicks me off. I don't know why. It just does. So we got like through a whole hour before that happened, which is pretty awesome. Like usually we're not that lucky. Okay, so and pop up the chat. There it is. That's what I want to do. Okay, here we go. We're back. All right, so yeah, we're done with the BYU BSU thing. I'm gonna boot your butt from the class. Don't test me on this. Especially you, Jetty. Okay, so.
I said you died.
Hey, you know, I'm prejudiced. I admit it. Okay, so we have this stuff, and then how does the world get made? Sort of. Mrs. C is also awesome. She's actually even more awesome than I am, so that's okay. You can call me Mrs. C.
Okay, Mrs. C.
Frog gets born, and sort of like in the scriptures and Genesis, he says the name of the stuff, and it sort of separates that from that. That's how it was seen in the Egyptian culture. Is you'd say.
Ionic matter forms.
That's
Did you guys find it interesting that he would name things, and as he named them, they came into being?
Yeah.
Did you find that cool? Can you think of a creation myth that does that differently? A very famous one that you will all, I'm sure, all be familiar with.
The Big Bang Theory.
Okay. I like that one. That, not where I was headed, but I like that.
Pow.
Good. You don't think of this as a myth, but it is one. Because it was written by someone that you know who that is, and it was written in a book. So you don't think of it as a creation myth, but it absolutely is a creation myth.
I think of it as
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Ooh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that one. That's a good one, though.
Is it
What
you?
about what?
Give us a hint.
C.S. Lewis.
No, he didn't. That was a myth. Liam, stop playing Space.
Go 1 second.
Elizabeth.
The Silmarillion.
Ooh, wow. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, Silmarillion's a great example. How about The
And that's
Magician's
the
Nephew?
100 pages.
Siri, bring up a list
Really
of
boring.
creation myths.
How many of you have read by wave of hand The Magician's Nephew?
I read The Magician's Nephew.
And how does the world get created in The Magician's Nephew?
It was sung into being.
It was
From a
sung
box
into
of
being.
fairies.
Yeah, Aslan sings it into being. Egyptian mythology, Ra names things and they appear. Everything has a true name. Do you use your true name? No.
No.
You do not tell anybody your true name.
Because then they have power over you.
Ouch.
There may or may not be something in Mormon theology that tightly corresponds to that. I'm just saying. So there's a lot of this sort of stuff. Like in very many cultures, African cultures, there's a lot of this. In African tribal culture, you don't get to learn somebody's real name, their true name. Ancient American culture as well, indigenous American culture, the Native American culture, a lot of the tribes have the same sort of thing. Or a little bit different, where you have a name that's your name, but you get a new name when you reach a certain place in your development. You become a man or you become a woman or whatever, you get a new name. In case you think like that's really weird, like that's bizarre, at least traditionally in our culture, ladies, when do you get a new name?
When we're married.
In fact, according up until the last like 20 years or so, your proper name once you got married was Mrs. whatever your husband's name is. Look it up.
Unless, like, well, yes, centuries ago, but like now, my last name is pretty cool. I'm gonna make him change it unless his name is cooler than mine. Like, just saying.
Like Sheba.
Yeah, you're gonna fall in love with somebody whose last name is like Pembersnicky or something. I guarantee it's gonna happen.
Peppa Snicker.
Yeah, that's even worse. Okay, so probably, yeah. Anyway, but having you changing your name is not a small deal. Okay, I have a very small understanding of this. For 2 years of my life, I was Elder Jones, which was kind of bizarre and hard to get used to. And now more people know me as Mr. C than anything else. Even though for 40 some odd years I was something else. I get called Mr. C. I went to Budapest last summer, and on the streets of Budapest, Hungary, somebody calls out, Mr. C, Mr. C. My wife wasn't even surprised. She's like, yeah, that doesn't even surprise me. I'm on another continent.
Kind of awesome.
I'm 8 time zones away. Nah, it doesn't matter. So names are kind of funny. And when you have, this goes into the Isis, or not Isis, Osiris and the name of Ra and whatever. Ra has more than one name too. So Ra names things and they come into existence, including certain gods. But there's actually maybe the most important thing in Egyptian mythology is not actually a god. Do you remember what that is? It's almost like the Force.
May the fourth be with you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I would have expected no less from you, frankly. As deeply steeped in Jedi culture as you are. What is that called? Not the Nile. That's good, though. The Nile's good. The Nile also is like too big to be a single god, too important. But the Nile is definitely a part of this. This is like the forces of order and discipline in the universe. You remember what that's called?
The laws of physics.
Oh God, something like that. Is that it with all the gods?
No, it's called Ma'at. Ma'at is the force of unity and order in the universe. And any disturbance in that must be by some sort of an evil force. There is an evil force as well, usually personified as a serpent. Egyptians are a long way from the only culture in the world that used the serpent as the incarnation of evil. If you are a Christian, for instance, Satan's original incarnation is a
snake.
A snake. If you are Norse and you happen to be, like me, a huge fan of the concept of Valhalla, the fall of the gods is going to be caused by blood and fire at Ragnarok, which happens when the worm, Ouroboros, gnaws through the roots of the tree Yggdrasil. And then the gods will fall. Norse gods are not immortal. Neither are Egyptian gods, are they? You can kill them. Well, they can kill each other. I don't think we can kill them, but they at least they can kill each other. That's also very Norse. So the idea that what is the name of the serpent? Does anybody remember? The force, which is sort of like the force of evil that kind of just grew out of the idea that if you have a force for order, you have a force for chaos. Anybody remember? It starts with an A. Go ahead, Joshua. Joshua. What? Yeah. Spell it in the chat. This is so. So you do have this serpent, Apophis, who causes all sorts of mayhem, but it's not really an actor. Like the worm Apophis doesn't really do anything. It just is like anything bad that happens. Well, that must have been it. You probably have a household in which bad things occasionally happen, and no one did them. You ask everybody, did you eat the last? No, I didn't eat the last donut. Did you eat the last? No, I didn't eat the last donut. No one did it. It is the worm Apophis. Am I going to tell you this story? Am I really going to tell you the story? I'm not going to tell you this story. I'm not. Okay. So, I'm not. Max want to hear it. All right. I'll tell you this story. Okay. Very quickly. Okay, but it's the same kind of thing. You can see how this stuff grew out of these cultures. Okay, so my sister Catherine, she has a number of children. Some of them are boys, and some of the boys are not. They're having trouble. Like occasionally they wet the bed. Okay, it's just a thing. Nobody makes them feel bad about it, but it just happens. So they asked the youngest child, who was sleeping in the bed, and the bed was wet in the morning, and his pajamas were wet, and they said, "Sam, did you wet the bed?" And he said, no, I wasn't me. And I mean, his pajamas are wet, the bed is wet. This is what's called probable cause in legal parlance. Like you could definitely bring him in for questioning, because he's like, no, he insisted, absolutely not. And they said, well, then who did this? And he said, I think it was the pee-pee sniper. So in their house, they have the legend of the pea sniper who does things mysteriously and no one can figure out like who did it. Like whenever there's one of those things, like who ate the last cookie? I don't know. I didn't eat it. Did you? No, I didn't. It was the pea sniper. He must have come in, and so that's their thing. Like that's the boogeyman in their house. Okay, so the boogeyman in Egyptian culture is the worm Apophis. But there are also evil gods, are there not? How do we get these? How do we get these gods? At the beginning, you just have Ra, or sometimes Ra is also rendered as Ptah. Ta, or we don't know. Because again, we don't speak Egyptian, but whatever. So sometimes they're the same god. It just depends on where you are and which myth you're reading and whatever. So that it's okay for these gods to kind of flow in and out of each other. Okay, so Ta or Ra or whatever and Nun are really the only beings that exist. Ra is busy like creating everything by naming it platypus, kangaroo, tardigrade, probably not that. He probably didn't know that name. But because the creation is an ongoing thing in Egypt. It's not just like a one-time event. Like I created everything. If you think about that, that's also true in Narnia. But if you think about it, it's also true in Narnia. Aslan sings a bunch of stuff into existence, but that's not the end of things that happen, right? And if you think about this, this is actually true. How many of you have gardens or farms, fruit trees? Do those things exist in February? Well, the fruit trees maybe. But you bring them into existence, do you not? Have you tried naming them? Have you tried speaking to them? Have you tried singing to them? I'm just saying.
I've done that before.
And what was your experience with that?
Well, they didn't respond back, and then my little brother killed them.
Did they go invisible?
Moral of the story, don't let your students tell their stories. Okay, so no, that's not the moral.
We name our chickens, but they all look alike, so we can't tell them apart.
We named our chickens too. Extra crispy, original recipe.
We have like 50 chickens.
Okay, well, I don't have that many different kinds of breading to put on my drumsticks. I would run out. So anyway, all right. So if you think about it, and the Egyptians thought about it this way: things are always being created. So there is not an end to creation, and I actually really love that about Egyptian mythology, because I feel like that feels true to me. Creation is not a one-time thing. Creation is an all-the-time thing. If you're a writer, you especially get this because every day, every minute of every day, because that's just what your brain does, you're making things come into existence. And if you think that, well, it's not real, like it's not real. Oh yeah? Oh yeah? In Egyptian, if you are an Egyptian soul, there are two pieces of you, aren't there? Right, Elizabeth? Right? Aren't there two pieces of you? Do you remember reading about a concept called the Ka? If you didn't read about this, you should. The Ka is not the snake. Trust in me. No, that is not. Had to get that song in there. If you don't quote the Jungle Book at least once during a class, it's not a good class. Okay, so this is not Ka, the snake. That is two A's, by the way. Just one A. Okay, Ka is your soul. It exists outside of you. It is protected by the gods. And then your physical self is different. All things in Egyptian mythology have a spiritual self and a physical self. That may be something you've heard before. You may be part of a theology that believes a similar kind of thing. I am. So if you're a writer and you're creating a world spiritually in your head, I mean, we don't talk about creating it spiritually, we talk about it as being fiction. But how many of you have read a book and gotten so deep into it that it felt realer than the life you were living? Me. Happens to me all the time. Yeah, or the book you're writing, like it starts to be weird that the actual like universe you're running around in doesn't behave the way that it behaves in your book. Or you start to wonder if maybe it does behave that way and you just haven't hit on the magic word yet. I wrote a short story about a gal who spent most of her life trying to figure out the magic words because her father told her that she had special powers that she could, but she just had to find the magic words. Cool story. I actually really like that one. Anyway, so yes, Emma, I have heard that. Anyway, we are creators. We are children of a creator, and we are participants in the creation. The creation isn't something that happened in Genesis. It's something that's happening right now, and you're a part of that. We're all a part of it. Everything we do, oh yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do participate in it. Everyone you talk to, everything you think, everybody who is your friend, who is part of your family, that you bump into on the street, that you avoid bumping into on the street. You may not write books, but you are writing reality all the time. All the time. You are participating in the creation every minute of every day. Don't take that power for granted. You are infinitely powerful, and you, like Ra, are bringing things into existence by naming them. Be careful with that. I mean this sincerely. Be careful. Names have power. The names you give yourself, they have power. Be careful with them. Be gentle to yourself. Oh, yep. Thank you. I don't always see that. It doesn't always flash at me. So if somebody needs to be let back in, let me know.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You have an almost infinite power to create for yourself and for others. Be so careful with the names that you give yourself and that you give to others. Be so careful with that. Because that power is real. And once you have named a thing, it is almost impossible to erase that name. Please be careful, my dear friends. Please be careful with this. What you have named your deepest self, the things you believe in your inmost heart, speaking of your heart, and the things you believe in your heart, that's what the Egyptians thought. This is the seat of reason. The heart is the seat of reason. It's your true self. That's why Osiris weighs your heart. Not your brain, not your body. Osiris weighs your heart because it's your true self. What you name your true self, that you will fight all your life to either defend that name or to get rid of that name.
If you're bad, throw it in an alligator, right?
Yes. Do not get eaten by an alligator. Defend your true name. Make your true name real. Make your true self real. Help other people make their true self real. Because it's an almost impossible task. It's so, so hard. But my dear, dear friends, that's what you're here for. We are here for this. We are children of a creator God who made this place for us to participate with him in the creation of things. If you are a woman, you have the chance to make a creation that walks around in reality and talks and eats ice cream. You have an opportunity to create a miracle. Taking that for granted is like it's painful to me. Please don't do that. Well, the boys actually, so far, we still have to participate. But the point is that you're creating all the time anyway. You name things. And you give power to things when you name them, or you take power from them. Please be careful with that. Please be careful with that. Do not think of creation as something that happened long ago, because you are in the process of creating right now. And you are hand in hand with the gods to make those creations. Don't forget that. Don't ever forget that. You are not just this. You are so much more. Anyway, so Ra, back to Ra. So Ra and Nun are really the only things that Ra is bringing things into existence. And by the way, there's nothing special about humans in Egyptian mythology. They're part of the animal kingdom for a long, long time. They become different, but at the beginning, they're the same as all the other animal kingdom. There is no like special day that Ra created human beings. Like that's not a thing in Egyptian culture. He just made all the animals, and humans are part of that. In fact, humans are like not really like a part of the gods at the beginning. But there's only two gods. There's Ra and Nun. And then Nun comes to Ra and tells him what? You remember? This is one of my favorite myths. I love this one. Joshua's got to look it up. Nun comes to Ra and says, I want something. What does she want? She has actually at this point decided gender is also kind of a fluid thing in Egyptian mythology, but at this point, Nun has decided she is a female, and Ra is generally speaking a male, although Ra, never mind, it's confusing. I can't separate it. What does Nun want?
A child?
Yes, Nun wants children.
Yeah.
And Ra says, sweet, sounds good. No, Ra does not say this. What does Ra say?
No, because he's afraid they'll take his place.
Where have I heard that before? Let's see, a child that would grow up to depose his father. That's so cool. Let's see, where have I? No, I can't come up with it. No. Greece. Oh, like, I don't, oh yeah, like Kronos and.
Yes!
Oh, I was thinking like Heavenly Father and Satan.
Except that there isn't really a prophecy that Satan will grow up to, but that is what Satan wants to do, right? Isn't that interesting? I didn't ever think of that until just then.
I was thinking of Moses and the children of Israel.
They're like queen bees, because every time a queen bee has a little girl, then she kills her so that she doesn't take her place.
How about Oedipus Rex? How about, that's fascinating in the natural world. I had not put that together. That was genius, man.
Well, also, like, if you take our parents, like, they just turn us into them, and then they die, and then we turn our kids into us, and then we die.
Okay. Yeah, all right. You could say that it comes that way. You got Cyrus the Great. You have Oedipus. You have
Horus the Avenger.
Snow White. This is like this is so common, right? And so what does the king always do when the king is like, oh, there's a prophecy that my child will grow up and take my place? What does the king always do?
Try to kill him.
Try to kill him. And most of the time,
that backfires.
It totally, not only does it not work, it backfires. What they do to get rid of the kid is the thing that causes the kid to depose them. This is what's called irony. And this is super true. This is 100% accurate. I mean, so this is Ra. So he's like, no, you can never have a child. What does Ra actually say to Nun?
What was that?
That's cute. No, he says you may have no child on any day of the year or any night of the year. No child on any day of the year or any night of the year.
I'm pretty sure doesn't. I can't remember her name, but doesn't she find a way to do it anyway with
always?
Yes, I know it.
Always.
I know it
The
too.
kid
I know it.
always grows up. Kenna. Hey, Kenna. Hi,
Hey.
Kenna. Hi, how are you?
Hi. Okay, so here's the story, how I can remember it. I think,
Okay.
I just barely read this. So, she looks for this way. Let me try and find it in the story because, let's see. Okay, yeah, I can't find it, but I'm pretty sure the mom. Okay, I can't remember it right now.
Okay,
I'm gonna try and find the story, and then let me put it in the chat.
Joshua?
Joshy knows it.
So she goes to Thoth, the wisest of all the gods, and he comes up with a plan to help her have children. So because
that's right,
every day and every night of that year, Thoth and whoever, I can't remember her name, went to the moon god and gambled for the moon's light, which is why it only shines as a full moon once every month now. They took that light and they added in 5 more days to the year, where she had 1 child each day.
Isn't that fascinating? So, let's say that you were an Egyptian and you wanted to mark off your time in a reasonable period. The Egyptians had 3 periods of the year. And each of them had, loosely speaking, 120 days in them, 4 cycles of the moon. But if you do that, does that work? Like, astronomically, does that work? It does not. What happens is that the inundation of the Nile keeps moving earlier and earlier in the year, and that's a problem. So it's only 360 days. How many days in the actual year, in the solar year?
365.25.
So 365 days. So if we had 360-day calendar, that would leave how many days left over?
5 and a quarter.
5 and a little bit over. So so this would square up the calendar then. So Thoth squares up the calendar. Then she has, that's right, Kenna, then she has a kid on each one of those days. That sounds exhausting, but whatever. She's a goddess, so she can do whatever she wants. So she has 5 gods. The 4 sons of Ra and Isis. So, but one of those sons, of course, he's not good. Which one of those is that?
Seth.
Isis is fine.
Seth.
Seth, yeah, also known as Seth.
Seth.
Because
he was born in darkness.
Yeah, okay, but the TH, that's not a thing outside of English.
So it's Set.
So it's Set. It would be pronounced Set even if the H was there because the th is not a thing outside of English.
You're right, Josh.
Not really. In fact, and this is probably my last fun fact for the day, but have you heard of a thing called a shibboleth? I love this story. Okay, so a shibboleth. This comes from the Bible. A shibboleth means your brother's name is Shibboleth? Wow. Okay. Your parents are awesome. A little weird, but awesome. Oh, Seth. Okay, you can call him Set, but then remember what I said about naming things? Maybe don't do that. Anyway, so unless you like living in the same house with the incarnation of evil. Or maybe you already are. I don't know your brother. So anyway, a shibboleth is something that separates one group of people from another, that makes someone an outsider. The Israelites were living in and among the Philistines and the Edomites and a lot of other people who were occasionally sending spies into their cities to kind of spy out, like where are their defenses and how their walls look and that kind of thing. So they needed a way to keep those people out, or at least to identify them so they knew who they were when they came into the city. So they created a password. The password is shibboleth. The reason this works is because in Arabic there is no sh and there is no th.
We can't hear you.
What? Sure you can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys can hear me though, can't you? Yeah, okay. Most of them can. All right,
Still
so
can't hear you.
they created this password called a
Mr.
shibboleth.
Z.
He's gonna do something with our sound.
That's weird. Hold on a minute.
Is your internet going down again?
It's not. I don't know. That's weird. Hey, Bex, can you hear me? Okay, sweet. All right, maybe that fixed it. Anyway, so the Israelites created a password. The password was shibboleth. Shibboleth works as a password because in Arabic there is no sh and there is no th. So if you grew up as a Philistine, you would say that word sibboleth, not shibboleth. So you would be able to tell. They look the same, but you would be able to tell who was a native Israelite, because they have those things, and who was not a native Israelite, because they couldn't say that word correctly. Thought I would throw that out there. If you're looking for passwords or whatever. Anyway, so right, so Thoth would gambled and got the 5 days, and then we have all these children, and then immediately you have one of them marries another one. You have
Osiris marries Isis.
Osiris marries Isis, and Osiris wants to become king, but the other brother cannot allow that to happen. Set cannot allow that to happen. So what does Set do?
Kills him. Tricks him.
Set tricks him.
Box.
Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
He makes a coffin that is just the right size for Osiris, but none of the other gods can fit in. And so he says that whoever fits in this coffin can have it, and Osiris lies down in it, and he finds that he's just the right size. So Seth throws the lid on and tosses it into the Nile River.
And
then
seals it
the
with
Nile
lead.
goes dry because the river is weeping. And then I haven't read this story in a really long time.
Okay, but
And
no,
then when Osiris came,
that's
I've
perfect.
read this story. I've read this story before.
Yeah, that's perfect. Can you think of another story in which there's a king yeah, well, I guess he would be a king, and has two sons, and one of them kills the other one to stop him from becoming all super important?
Adam and Eve?
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot
about it.
Yeah, there's a lot. Cain and Abel, though, yeah, is a perfect example. I'm just saying. Okay, we are ridiculously and impossibly out of time. Okay, I have an assignment for you, though.
Oh,
You'll like this one.
I'll quit while I'm ahead.
Okay, here's your assignment. Read up on some of these myths. Now, this book is a little harder to read. It's a little more academic. Those of you who are a little bit older, this gives you a really good perspective, or I guess if you're Rachel Louise, who vacuums up all of Egyptian knowledge that she can get her hands on as fast as possible. Not all of you are as weird as Rachel Louise. It's okay. You are in a good way, like weird in a good way. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to read the Roger Lancelin Green. I want you to read the books of Egyptian myths. keep working your way through that. Use this also as this one actually will take those myths and actually put them in context of like where they found the writing from these things. Super good to work those two books together. But your job is to write an original Egyptian myth.
Wait, what?
Your job is to write an original Egyptian myth. Do I stutter? Okay, so you get to, it can be long, it can be short, it can explain like why something exists. It can, I don't know.
So I get to make something up about gods of Egypt.
Yep. That's right.
Okay, cool.
Elizabeth.
Is there a word limit?
No.
I would have trouble with word limits. I write 10,000 words easily.
Make it take, it takes as long as it takes. It's a story, right? So it takes as long as it takes.
I just don't want you to be up all night because I wrote 20,000 words.
I want to be up all night because you wrote 20,000 words.
Enjoy your summer reading, Mr. C.
Wait, you think I sleep? Come on. Come on. And that would give me something to do that's not work. And that would be, well, it's kind of work. It's sort of work. It's like defensively work, right? It's work. It's kind of work. No real requirements, no. Here's what I would like to see, though, and what would be useful, I think, for you and for me, okay? So what I would like to see is that you use the names of some of the Egyptian gods. They can be as obscure as you like. I don't care. I would like you to use some of them. And in your myth, have those gods do more or less the kinds of things that they would do in in Egyptian culture. As much rooted in the culture as possible, and ideally as plausible as possible. So the kind of thing where, yeah, that sounds like that could be like an actual authentic Egyptian myth. Now, if you don't want to obey those rules, that's okay. But breaking the rules means you better be super clever. So I'll be looking for super clever to make that, wow. Elizabeth, yes, I see your hand again.
Could you repeat the rules, please? I wasn't listening because I had to clean up the tea I spilled all over my bed.
You don't actually need to pay any attention to the rules.
Oh, okay.
They don't apply to you.
I like this homework.
I thought you would. So keep reading. I will also send you some stuff. We're going to keep going as far as the pharaohs and stuff go. I want to place the major Egyptian monuments in terms of their history and what they mean. But for the most part, actually knowing a big long list of the pharaohs, this is not going to help you with anything. Google knows those much better than you do and can reproduce them much faster than you, and that doesn't really matter. What matters is the stories. Here's why. Google is really good if you say, geez, Google, who were the pharaohs of the 15th dynasty? Google's really good at that. If you are, Google, I'm sad. What do I need to make me feel better? Google sucks at that. So what you need then is a pool of stories you can draw on of people who had horrible things happen to them, but they got out of them or fought their way through it or whatever. Or stories about people who were nice to other people, who went and found people who were in trouble and helped them. I will send you a myth that was written by one of the students in another one of my classes that reads seriously like an actual Egyptian myth. Like if I put it in the book with Roger Lancel and Greens, I'm telling you, you would not be able to tell that she had just made it up. It's spectacular. It's so good. But you're capable of that kind of thing. Use the stuff that we talked about today, the stuff that we've thought about. Use the concept of the Ka, the concept of Nun and Ra, the idea of brothers and sisters don't always get along, but eventually they come back around to being okay with each other. But the training of the mind, thank you. Yes, Albert Einstein, ladies and gentlemen. Albert Einstein. That's what I want. I want you to know the stories. I want, when you read the Bible, to think, hey, that reminds me of Egyptian mythology. And then to think to yourself, if all of these cultures have the same kinds of stories, I wonder if what that means with regard to whether they're true. Because I'm telling you that some of these stories are true. I'm not saying always that they actually happened, but that doesn't mean they're not true. Just because they may not have actually happened, that doesn't mean they're not true. Truth is a funny thing to pin down. Anyway, I'm telling you, some of these stories are true. So write some. Send them to me. Mr. C at aliasmrc.com. I will read them. We will get a selection. We'll have some of my favorites read out in class next time.
Can you put your email in the chat?
I will. Thank you. Every class I teach is a philosophy class. Every class I teach is also a history class, and also an English class, and also a weird fact there's no reason you should ever need to know class.
That explains a lot.
Does it?
So you'll want to be teacher of everything?
Wouldn't you? If you were going to teach, why limit yourself?
I would teach one thing.
I do teach one thing.
I'd teach the PX90 modified version.
I'm not taking that class. Kick my butt, man. Although anytime you want to play ball, I'm here for you.
Got it.
I can still beat you. I would want to teach dragon history. I would want to take dragon history. Goodbye, Mighty Mighty Beck family. Goodbye, goodbye. And my internet's dying anyway, so.